I found that whenever you need to drive change, as with many things, right? The bigger the pain, the bigger the change. And so every time I stumble upon either a new tool or new tech development, I first test it out personally. People think that the extent of AI is just a chat session, and they're missing out on all the insane things that AI can do now. Change management, having a very clear change management framework helps incredibly. And one of the things that we focus on is making sure that we get buy-in. And for us, it was quite interesting because we actually took a two-prong approach. So
Hey, Jose, how are you doing, my friend?
hey, Michael, it's going pretty well. It's
Pretty
a
well.
fine rainy day here in tropical Guatemala.
Nice. It's actually rainy there here in Montreal, Canada as well. So we're sharing the same sentiment. Cool. Look, I'm super pumped for today's conversation because the topic is top of mind for our clients, for people who are looking into bringing AI to their organization, more than just a tool, but as a transformational, let's say, arm to the business. And you're someone who's been implementing AI for the past 2 years, I would say, if not more. I wanted to, dig into your best practices, things you learned, things you would do differently. But before doing that, I want our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in sales, and what you're working on currently.
Yeah, so I am an industrial engineer by training, so very far off from where I thought I was going to be. Have had a very twisty road journey to get to where I am. I did manufacturing, I did quality assurance, finance, then analytics, business intelligence, program management. And within all of those, I did sales a long time ago. It was face-to-face sales. Lastly, sort of closed the loop back again at sales. So it's been a long road. The inspiration sort of the first time I did sales, it came from my grandmother. I think I still am a very introverted person. I dreaded talking to people. It was a huge challenge for me. And she gave me this beautiful book. It was a handbook, actually, one of those little tiny ones that you can carry with you. And it was the topic was around the art of closing the deal face to face, and it involved around body language, eye contact, the handshake, like things that normally you don't find in many places, right? Because it did highlight some of these critical activities. And I remember I read it. I dreaded the first few instances were horrible, probably for both me and the poor buyer, because I was still learning, and I was young, by the way. This was when I was between 17 or 18, and after a month of just going hard at it, kept on reading it because it was a short book. You could read it like in an hour and a half. So I kept on rereading multiple sections of it to keep practicing. And I remember I gave myself the challenge of every single person that walks in, it doesn't matter the size of what they're buying, the dollar value, they had to buy something. And I remember that after multiple times of trying, I finally did my month where every single person that stepped in, I would be able to buy
100% close ratio.
Yeah, I mean, for the people that stepped in, and I remember that month that I did it, it felt insane because it didn't matter. I was selling like small little things, but the thing was they could not leave the store without something in their hands. And so, yeah, I managed to do it. And, I've always kept those learnings, I guess, throughout all the different steps in my career. It's
I
helped me.
love it. Yeah, I love this story is because that's where I think things really stick, especially when you're younger. I used to sell sneakers to my friends at school. It's just bought a brand new stickers or received a cap as a gift, and I was really fascinated by the fact that you can actually sell it to someone, go buy two, keep one, and sell the other one. So that's kind of like how I got into sales, and I always get excited when I hear these stories about like family businesses or things we did as a child that kind of stuck with us up till now. Let's talk about your current role. You're head of sales at Ergeon right now. You have a team of 100 plus sellers, and it's been a long journey with the company. You guys are scaling. So I want to hear about that. What are you working on, these days? How's the journey been with Ergeon? And then we can get into specifics about the AI and how to adopt tools.
Yeah, I joined 7 years ago. almost 7 years ago, getting very close to that time. I joined as a sales manager. Back then, the team was pretty small. It was just a few people, and year after year, we kept on adding team members, expanding geographical coverage. Also, the different types of products that we were selling kept on expanding, and it's gotten to the point where right now we are primarily, I guess you could say, like four big teams within sales, and each team does different things. Our biggest team is the residential sales team, which is nearly 80-ish people, and yeah, we just kept on pushing and increasing conversion, learning, failing, learning again. It's been a proper roller coaster. Yeah, I think anyone who has worked in a startup would agree, right? Try, you give it your best shot, and then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and you learn and you keep on moving forward. But that's the main thing, is you're always learning, on never staying stagnant.
Absolutely. Things are changing quickly, and you need to learn to fail fast
Yep.
and adopt quickly to be able to survive and thrive. So look, I want this podcast to always be unfiltered. So you're our client. I mean, those who know us in the space know that, some people don't. But more so about SellMeThisPen, I want to hear your experience as of why you started actually looking for a solution about 2 years ago. What
Yeah.
business problem you were trying to solve for your company, and how did you end up like saying, "Hey, maybe I need AI for this"?
Actually, the journey was an interesting one. When ChatGPT came out, I think it was November 2022, if not mistaken. A
I
really long
believe
time
so
ago
too.
now.
I don't remember
Yeah.
anymore.
So I don't remember how, but I somehow got beta access to it. So before it was like officially rolled out, I got early access and I started using it. And as with many people, when you get your hands on this amazing technology, it's kind of hard to understand, like, what are the limits? What can it do? And so I remember the very first thing I asked it was, help me write a poem, because I wanted to see, like, can it write?
Yeah.
How good does it write? I was surprised by the output. I was like, geez, this is, and mind you, back then it was GPT-3, not even 3.5, which was like the major rollout, right? And I remember I was pretty blown away. Like, this is something we've never seen
Powerful.
before, that a computer being able to generate this level of what seemed to be creativity.
Mhm.
Normally something you only associate with humans, right? And so curiosity definitely got the best of me. And I started pushing to understand what were the limits of what it could do. And back then, very early on, no access to the web, very old training data. So one of the first things that I used it for, and I remember I didn't share this with anyone back then, was I wanted to see, could this thing sell? Because the more you tested it, the more you see, okay, it has good knowledge, like it knows a lot. And so I tested it with our own industry. And so I, asked it to role play with me. I was going to play a customer. It was going to play the salesperson. And I remember I did a couple of back and forths, and the responses I was getting, I could tell you they could easily match our top closers, probably even beat them, with the way
Wow.
that the answers were being framed. And not only that, the technical knowledge was spot on.
Mhm.
So, all the time that we took to train someone to learn all the technical aspects, this thing could do very quickly. So when I first realized all of this, I kept it to myself. It was like, Jesus, this is something else. Like, at the back then, we didn't know the rate that it was going to be improving, but
Yeah.
just the initial state that it was capable of doing so much with so little training. I kept on using it, used more of the tools that were available, and all that stuff. And as with many things, normally, the drive to search for something comes with a problem that you have to solve. Very specifically for me, the problem that I had was, for us to be able to hit the growth targets that we had as a company, that meant we need to increase our sales team capacity massively. Like, we needed to run big hiring groups. And so in the past, the way that we've done them was always with, very focused on, giving them one-on-one time, lots of attention. We would do role plays. There's always the theoretical aspect of it. So back then, it would take us somewhere around 5 to 6 weeks to do a full training group. We call them boot camps. So 6 weeks to run a boot camp, and at best, we could do 12 people at a time. primarily because beyond that point, attention gets diluted and, you just don't get good pass-through rates with people. And so we were managing somewhere around 80%, 75 to 80% graduation rates with groups of 12. And it would take 6 weeks. And to that, you also needed to add the fact that it would take somewhere around 6 weeks as well to find the people to put into the bootcamp. So the entire journey roughly took 3 months. So about a quarter. And that quarter yielded maybe 9, 8 people, give or take. Turns out that what we needed was to increase our capacity nearly per month by 30 people. So as you may imagine, if I needed to effectively add 30 people to the team every single month, that meant I needed to run massive training groups. And so we started thinking, like, how can we do it? And, there were lots of things that we were able to optimize internally, like the content delivery, the coaching, and all these stuff. We figured out how to split the work amongst different people, streamline the content, eliminate the fluff, if you will, like keep it to the core essentials. Yep. But where we ended up facing the biggest constraint was every single role play used to take us somewhere around an hour to maybe around 90 minutes, depending on the topic that we were covering. And it was primarily because we needed to prep, we needed to do the role play. And after the role play, we analyzed the conversation and gave the people feedback so they would learn how to improve. So in the best case scenario, we would be able to give people maybe 3 to 4 role plays per the entire training round, just because of the level of energy and time it would require. And so when you think about groups of 50, the first thing that we challenged was we just don't have the human resource to be able to cover the demand that would be generated by attempting to give everyone role plays. And the challenge is, if we're going to run 50 people bootcamps, then the concentration, if you will, of the one-on-one time was going to get severely diluted. So that meant that practice needed to become even far more relevant, and practice that would give them real-time feedback the same way that we were doing. And so unless we wanted to all of a sudden hire like 20 trainers to be able to deliver this crazy amount of role play, that's when the search started. And by the way, I didn't start with AI as a search. I just wanted a tool that would allow me to do some of these things. And so I looked at multiple different vendors. I think I spoke with 6 different ones, trying to understand, pros, cons, what they could do, some of the benefits, cost as well, cost implications. One of the things that was very interesting was the ability to integrate with how we worked. And that actually became one of the definitive deciding factors, because with many of these companies that I spoke with, they had somewhat rigid models, as in it either works with you or just doesn't work with you. And they were very unwilling to collaborate with me. And mind you, some of these companies were quite new. And so they would have had the flexibility to be able to adapt. But ultimately, that was probably one of the key factors. Interestingly enough, how I stumbled upon you guys was pure chance, coincidence, fate, I guess you could say, because I was part of a group that focused on the impact that stress has in terms of the performance of sales. And, phenomenal group that I was a part of. And I had the opportunity, we were having a conversation, we were sort of exploring some of the challenges that each one of us was facing. And I told them my problem. And this is where Gail came in. And then she told me, like, I know someone who is working in the same space that you're, the problem that you have. Maybe you should talk with him. And I was like, yes, please send me the contact or connect us. And that's how the initial connection through LinkedIn happened.
That is true. Like, it's been a long journey since, we got introduced, and it's been a good journey, I would say. We walked through a lot of iterations and learnings together. Let me ask this for my selfish need, because I think a lot of people right now ask these questions to themselves, because, like, hey, you mentioned too, I look at 6 competitors or people in the space that potentially could help. And many people right now evaluating maybe 20 tools, because we're not building technology is not necessarily a main differentiator right now. Everybody can build. Of course, the quality could be different, but there are multiple reasons as to why we choose a vendor. I want to hear from your perspective, unfiltered answer. Why the heck did you choose us? At the time, we were really early.
Yeah. First off, I think, to be fair, the tech helped. the level of maturity, I guess you could say, from a technical perspective, what you guys showcased and what your platform was able to do blew my mind, because it literally was like, this is exactly what I need from a technical standpoint. So to your point, the question then became, okay, if the tech is there, what else was taken into account for us to decide to push this forth? And to your point, right, very early on, I think this is where probably my own personality, I guess, helped a little bit. I'm not afraid of risk, at least not measurable and calculated risk. And the reality is, it didn't matter what company you looked at. If they were truly at the forefront of AI, they had to be new, purely because the technology didn't exist before. And so
Yeah.
what would happen, and this is actually what I stumbled upon, was there were two main, I guess, categories or groups, if you will, of companies that I spoke with. Older companies that were doing something somewhat remotely in this space and were rushing to try to bring AI into what they were doing. And you could see that it was half baked. It wasn't necessarily there, and it was more a gimmick than actually taking advantage of AI. And then the other group was genuinely new companies that were entering the space working with AI first. And so the reality is, the first group, first off, their pricing was just insane. Like, they were charging way too much. And again, the tech didn't wow me. And then on the other group, the prices were better. But one of the bigger problems that I found was it was mainly created by tech people that didn't really understand the problem. And I think this is where you particularly played a big portion, because you understand sales. You came from sales. And the fact that you understood it made all the conversations made a lot more sense in terms of what we needed to do, the challenges that we were facing, and more importantly, more so than just a vendor, you became a problem solving partner to think of, these are real sales problems that happen in any other company. How would we address them? Like, how could we tackle these challenges? And so, to me, those two aspects, I think, were the biggest factors that tech wowed me. And you particularly have a lot of sales knowledge, and so I could actually take advantage of you as a problem solving thinking partner, not just a technical vendor, pretty much.
Glad to hear. This is a big validation. But on a serious note, I think one of the ways we even in particular, right, even right now after 2 years, we're trying to position ourselves is that it's not about the tech only, because you
No.
go through a lot of iterations, especially if you're a scale up or companies that go through a lot of changes. Like everybody's going through a lot of changes right now. You need a partner who adapt to those changes with you. And many people might not actually choose this. They may only need a platform. I just need for example, a role play tool or
Mhm.
a AI, sales coaching tool, whatever it might be, a functionality to solve a specific problem. But if companies are looking for transformation, you need someone who's willing and flexible enough to change with you. There's no other way around it. AI is still new after 2 years, although we can do a lot. There are certain things that still it's a black box for many organizations,
Mhm.
and one being adoption, getting
Yeah.
adoption without a playbook, because CRM, other stuff, like they've been around for decades, and we learn how to get adoption from. But I wanted to ask this question to you specifically because I remember when we rolled this out, it was a complete different, set of solutions and problems we were trying to, solve. And looking at our journey, things really changed, massively changed. I want to hear from you early on, first and foremost. How did you get the buy-in from the leadership team, and then frontline managers, and then the end users?
I'm going to start probably in the middle. I found that whenever you need to drive change, as with many things, right? The bigger the pain, the bigger the change, and probably the faster you're going to try to make the change. And so, one of the things that I've been hyper focused on, and I keep on doing, by the way, is every time I stumble upon either a new tool or new tech development, I first test it out personally. I try to get a
Mhm.
sense of, okay, what is this really capable of? And if I find myself being blown away, and I try to stay up to date with the latest available tools and tech and papers that are being written, just to make sure that I have a good grasp of what's happening in the sector, right? And every now and then I will be properly shocked, like, geez, this thing is just a whole nother step forward, right? And
Mhm.
when I come across these things, one of the things that I like doing is giving a slap in the face, if you will, wake up call to everyone that's close to me so that they understand what it means for this tech to be available and what it will mean for their jobs and probably their surroundings. So I actually very recently did something similar, and I showcased, right, like, this is what the tech is capable of doing right now. And remember, the way to think about it is this is its current worst version. As time passes, it only gets better and better and better. You're always working with the worst version. And so I've had people be like, it's, you get multiple reactions, right? There's people that get really excited and can see potential, and the most common reaction is they worry, right? They get afraid of what it
Yeah.
means. It could mean they're without a job. It could mean that what they're doing can now be done by AI and all these things. And to me, the best way to get them into action so that they actually take the time, learn, research, improve is by showcasing what the tools can now do. And if they're not improving at the same rate as the tools are improving, they're
Mhm.
going to be left behind. And so I try to keep the frontline managers, which is the people that I work with the most, always up to date with what's available and keeping them with a bit of a sense of, based on the rate that things are improving, if we don't improve at the same rate or even faster, these things will take over. And if
Basically,
they,
give
and
reality check.
yeah, again, I call them slap in the face. It's one of those, like, sort of slap to get you into action. So because it's very easy, if you're not subscribed to all the news and all that stuff, it's very easy to think, it's just ChatGPT. Like,
Yeah.
that's the tool that most people interact with. It's so funny because Claude has been available for a really long time, and if you ask
Yeah.
people about Claude, very
What
few people know about Claude.
what is
Like,
that?
ChatGPT is the thing that people know, right? And people think that the extent of AI is just a chat session, and they're
Mhm.
missing out on all the insane things that AI can do now. And that's what I take the time to show them is, like, this thing that you thought that wasn't possible, look, 2 minutes, done.
And that's true because I remember when we were walking through the pilot phase, you got your managers involved, not only sales or frontline managers.
Yeah,
We had people from different organizations getting involved.
yeah.
So you start there, and then you go for the reps to achieve what exactly? Because it's a new tool. Like, what were the expectations or KPIs in your mind?
Yeah.
And you communicated a lot. We had a plan, I remember. But what you were expecting to get from the end user more than frontline managers that
Mhm.
basically, led us to signing an agreement and rolling it out company wide.
Yeah, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that because of how we rolled things out, we started with role playing because that was, like, the
Yeah.
primary core focus of what we're trying to achieve. So I had the distinct advantage that the end user was going to be new people in the company.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to, I guess, make them forget old behaviors to
Yeah.
install new behaviors. I had the advantage of installing
Mhm.
new behaviors from the get go. So that gave me a very straight up advantage, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But to be fair, past that point, we've actually deployed additional things to the
Mhm.
existing team, which has required us to follow proper change management methodology. And so, one of the things that it always helps, and actually, I shouldn't say it helps, it is critical for the success, is help them understand why we're making the change, what it means for them, and how are they going to benefit towards the end. And so, for our team, if we were to focus on, the way that we were doing role playing at the very beginning, I actually did a session with them where I
Mhm.
got them really pumped about the fact
Mhm.
that back then, keep in mind back then, right? This was, when was it? Like 2023, right?
2 years ago.
And very few companies had really adopted AI, like, very few. And so one of the things I told them was, like, you're actually in one of the very few companies that is leveraging AI to give you guys an edge so that you can
Mhm.
start performing better, right? And we
Yeah.
told them about the benefit of, it's a safe space. AI is not going to judge you. There's no judging. You can role play anytime you want, however many times you want. Practice, repeat, get better, get better, get better, get better, so that when the time comes and you come into the team, you can actually sell with confidence, right? And as it turns out, that's actually what happened. The team that came out of the first group very quickly, they ramped up in about, I think it was the third I think it was a third of the regular time it took us before. And not only that, but once they had ramped, they actually started outperforming most of our tenure team. Like only the very few top closers were still a little bit ahead, but it was a noticeable night and day difference. And you could hear it. They were far more confident. They knew their stuff. They didn't get stuck in, process-based challenges or anything like it, because the roleplay was quite sophisticated and it actually gave them the expectations of every single step that they needed to take and how to carry the conversation so that they could close a deal. And so I had that benefit, right? Because it was a new behavior. It was easy for them to see it all as pro. It was all pros, if you think about it, right? We were only giving them benefits. And people were really excited. Now, once it came to deploying additional features to our existing team, we did have to follow a very methodical approach of change management, help them understand why we were changing things, what was sort of broken in the way that we were doing things before, and help them forget and then install the new procedure. Constant reinforcement, practice, coaching, making it visible so that people would understand, look, this is what we're expecting, this is the behavior, and you can track yourself by looking at very specific metrics. And so that approach and constant reinforcement, because that's just the reality, right? These things require constant reinforcement. And one of the last things that we did was, once we understood that everything was working as we expected and the benefit was real, then it went from we're testing to it is now mandatory. This is now a tool that the company has invested in, and we expect adherence to its utilization. So that then on the other side of the equation, we could take also the benefits from, gaining better insights, additional data points that we didn't have in the past. So yeah, that's how we took it. Now, to your last point, how did I convince senior executives in the company? Interestingly enough, I think that was the easier one, to be fair, because the reality is the problem was real. And it wasn't that I was over exaggerating, right? I actually ran the numbers. I ran the requirements for headcount to support a bootcamp of that size, what it would have costed the company to be able to pull that off, the amount of time that we would have needed, and then compare and contrast that to the cost of AI. And of course, considering ramp up times, implications, unforeseen problems and whatnot, it was no contest. It was night and day type numbers. And so it was easy from a mathematical / financial perspective. It made complete sense. So the question was more so around the fact of, do you think we have the right vendor? Like, is there any other company that we should be looking at? Granted, the money is there, the investment is approved. Are you sure that this is the right person? And this is, again, going back to what I was saying before, is that with every other founder, they were computer science people, which, again, amazing because their tech is good, but they didn't get why some of these things were far more relevant than other features, and why I needed specific things to be really good and others, it was okay that it was okay. We could work on them later on. And I think this is where the biggest difference came in, because, I guess probably getting ahead of some topic that we'll cover into the future, is you and I have spent a lot of time brainstorming on not only solutions for the team, but also future enhancements to the platform. And I think part of the reason why we jive so well and we can sort of get in tune with our brainwaves is that we come from the same standpoint. It's not a salesperson talking to a technical person trying to convince them why it makes sense. Here, we actually both get on the train and yes, it makes sense. We just need to figure out how to make it work.
Guys, so yeah, there's secret, meetings. We call them poolsides.
Yeah.
To brainstorm ideas. Oh, I get your point. Let me ask you something about this, Jose, because I'm really interested in hearing. I don't know if we can even talk about it, but Jenny, your CEO, is a good friend, so hopefully we have the permission. So when you had this conversation internally, because Jenny might not come through sales background, right? She has consulting background, very smart human being. Our kind of like dynamic made sense to you. That okay, this guy knows sales. We can again build this platform together based on what we need, not only today, but in the future as well. How did you communicate this as a differentiator to Jenny? Because I remember you were evaluating some really well-known brands and convincing it like, okay, this early stage startup will maybe yield better result from them. So I'm just curious, how did you actually position this?
There was some fear. To be fair, as with any
Yeah,
startup, there's always that fear that,
yep.
today we sign and who knows, maybe in a year they're not here anymore, right?
Out of
It happens.
business.
So, it's sad, but it does happen. And, that had been the case. Now, the reality is you were not the first AI based company that we worked with. I had
Hmm.
already done some additional work with another company that was specifically focused on QA. And it
Hmm.
was, I think this company actually was even earlier stage than you
Yeah.
guys, like
Mhm.
much earlier stage. And so I think, again, the framing was somewhat similar in the sense of I research, and actually, because I think QA is far more established as a service, if you will.
Yeah.
I got the chance to speak with some really well-known companies, and I
Hmm.
spent a lot of time back and forth with their account managers and trying to figure out, can we make it work? What can work?
Yeah.
And the first thing that I realized is we internally as a company have some unique, I guess you could say, constraints in that most companies that work with established CRMs, but we work with a CRM we built internally.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, that has always been one of the challenges that we have, is that you have all of these big names that work well with Salesforce as an
Yeah.
example, or HubSpot,
Yeah.
right? And they integrate with a couple of clicks and it works beautifully. But we don't use
Hmm.
any of those. And that meant that their solution needed to be tailored for us, or I would need to sort of give up on those features. And a lot
Hmm.
of the features were exactly what we needed. And so part of the conversation in that with that first company that I worked with, it was around the same concept of, the challenge is there are well-known names that I know that we could sign with, and
Yeah.
they're not going to go away. Very well established. The problem is, out of everything that they offer, maybe we get access to around 30%. Why?
Mm.
Because the limitations of RCR. And there is no way around it. Like, they won't budge, they won't change it, nothing we can do. And so the idea was, if we want to build something that works exactly for us, specifically for what we're looking for, then we need to go with a company that is more open to being able to cater to what we need. And normally those tend to be early stage companies. And
Mhm.
so that first, I think, because we had good success with that first company, um, I think that sort of helped me pave the way, because it was,
Mhm.
to a certain degree, the same problem. I went again, I searched for everything, lots of nice companies that would integrate with some names, but they didn't work with what we needed. And so I needed
Mhm.
someone who was willing to explore what it would take to make it work with us. And so that helped me a lot when it came to being able to frame things. I think the other thing, and I think we would need to ask Jenny, but the reality is, I think to a certain degree, I've been in the company for nearly 7 years. Again,
Mhm.
it's not always been success, but I think I've done more good than bad, because the company has kept on growing, and
Mhm.
I think that has also gave me some trust in that, I am genuinely looking for the well-being of the company as I
Yeah.
am evaluating all of these things. And I think that trust factor, again, we would need to ask her how much it ended up playing in the equation. She's the only one that knows, but I do know that some of it was also in the mix. That she, while she may have had some reservations, she
Mhm.
saw that I did trust in the work that you were doing, that I saw what you guys were capable of, and that I could see the benefit of the impact. So I think to some degree, she also decided to trust in my assessment of the company.
Mhm. Mhm. I
And
love
that's
that.
how we ended up getting the yes. And again, the numbers made sense. Financially, it made sense.
No, this is really interesting because you can bring all the numbers, you can do all the assessments. If trust is not there, you're gonna have a really hard time, selling this internally.
Yeah.
And kudos to you, like again, you've been around the company, you've been growing the company, with the founders, and I think that played a big role into get the buy-in and start this process. Because if you remember, it was really crazy
Yeah.
hours we spent, even like hours your team actually invested. Some of those things that we did together those days, right now it's completely automated. Remember, like instead
Yeah.
of waiting to roll out something, right now it's just a matter of minutes, because not only LLMs got better, we as a company got better, because
Yeah.
you learn, like especially after 2 years.
Interestingly enough, you were talking about trust. I do think that to a certain degree, that also played a role in terms of the adoption, in
Yep.
that, as with any team, right, there's always attrition, turnover, but there's still team members in the company that came in around the same time I did. And these team members have seen the ups and downs, the changes, and how every time, things seemed, I don't want to say sketchy, but not clear. We ended up better afterwards. And so, because we have all of these instances of massive change, transformation of the work, and seems scary at first, or people have strong emotional reactions to it,
Yeah.
but ultimately, after you look back, it was like night and day. And specifically within the company, we actually had an instance where we ended up developing an internal tool that allowed our team to create quotes considerably faster. So we went from being able to quote in maybe 3 days time to quote in 20 minutes. And interestingly enough, despite that being like a glaring advantage,
Yeah.
we faced resistance within the team. People
Mhm.
didn't trust the tool. And as with many technology rollouts, right, there's always bugs and stuff that need to be squashed. And that can sometimes hurt credibility. And so we did have some strong naysayers. But even those people, once they look back, they realize, like, how was I, like, what was I thinking? I was not using this. And, interestingly enough, I think that has also earned me some trust from the team. Now, granted,
Yeah.
there's a lot of new people don't know me, but the reality is, if you were to think about, different methods to get all of these tools rolled out, you always have your influencers within the team. Now, luckily for me, a lot of the influencers in the team are people who have worked with me and with the leadership team for a really long time. And
Mhm.
so they know that even though things may look or may seem a bit crazier right now, they trust that the same way that we've done it in the past, we try to iterate. It's not like things are set in stone, right? And we become
Mhm.
inflexible. We listen, we learn from their feedback, we adapt, and we keep on pushing. We keep on pushing until we make things better. And I think the same trust that helped me with Jenny, I think is the same trust that helped me with the team. That I've been building that trust throughout many years of working with many of them.
This is really interesting, and you know what it kind of like reminded me of. While you were saying this, I remembered, like, as soon as we met with your managers, with your performance coach, then your content, people got involved, and we started
Mhm.
building those libraries. I remember you introduced us to 4 or 5 highest performing reps in the org,
Yeah, yeah,
and unlike many other organizations that they come with this thought process, I have people on PIP, I have low performing reps. Let's start with those. You did it backward. You said, let my high performing reps who are actually in the front line come and test this out to see the efficacy of it and see if
Mhm.
we can get buy-in. And remember Kelly, or one of your
Yeah, yeah.
high performing
Jorge,
reps,
Kelly, a couple of
yeah,
people.
they,
Yeah,
they actually find those, golden nuggets and started sharing on Slack. I remember those
yeah,
like screenshots you guys were sending.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was one of the reasons we got other folks, being interested in at least learning what is this thing that they keep talking about. Even we get other orgs internally starting
Yeah.
asking for the what is this thing. And I think, to your point, really have an army of influencers internally could, help massively. So
Yeah.
it's not always on, vendor or you as a leader. You need partners to roll this out, especially if you run a larger, sales organization.
I think that there's many things that help, but for sure, one of them is making sure that you have very clear guidelines, playbooks, frameworks that your team follows. And for us, one thing, again, this is one of those crazy things that at the time when I was a program manager, I never thought I was going to probably ever use it again afterwards. Turns out a lot of the same stuff I applied back
Mm-hmm.
then turned out to be quite helpful here. So change management, having a
Mm-hmm.
very clear change management framework helps incredibly. And one of the things that we focus on is making sure that we get buy-in. And for us, it was quite interesting because we actually took a two-prong approach. So one was our established team members
Yeah.
get the buy-in and then get them to positively influence the change in the rest of the team. But the other thing that actually worked was when the tenure team started realizing how well the newcomers were doing, they also started asking, hey, what is it that they're doing? But what's the secret sauce to all of these folks? And
Mhm.
that also helped drive a lot of the adoption.
Interesting. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails? These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With SellMeThisPen AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at SellMeThisPen AI. Look, we have a shortage of time, unfortunately. I want to ask some rapid-fire questions, but before doing that, I'm going to ask my last question because I really want to share this with our network because I think there's tons of learning in this. We had to walk through iterations. So you have people who got used to certain things, like some of the spend is about role play and coaching, or other tools you implemented solve certain problem at the time. How would you navigate the fact that, look, I want to keep a vendor around, even if usage for certain functionalities that we paid for is not as strong as before? Because we had this, challenge. If you remember, you went through, changing some part of the organization, some, processes changed, and we realized like role plays and coaching might not get enough love compared to, day one. But you decided to stay with us as a vendor. So I'm just curious, like, what really prompted you to do this? Because it's still, an unanswered question to me personally.
It's a good question. And to be fair, this is one of those problems that I don't think will ever go away. And the reason why I say this is, I guess you could laugh or cry how you see it. We jokingly used to call Mondays Change Mondays because there's always new stuff coming down, either a new direction, a new approach, new tools, new tech, new processes. And that means that, whatever you ended up deploying from a tools perspective is likely going to become outdated somewhat fast. And in all fairness, because of the speed at which we change is so fast and so constant, this is still an ongoing problem for us. I won't lie, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Because of this pace of change, one of the first things that we have challenges with is sometimes people are not aware that things changed. I think the key factor here is because we're all remote company, right? So our sales team is across 22 different countries. That plays a big factor in the sense of it's not that you can stumble across someone or you can peek over your desk and see, oh, they're doing something I'm not doing, right? Or someone else is, you hear people doing different stuff. Our team is 100% remote. And so dissemination of information is actually a very serious challenge that to this day, we have not given up on the problem, but I don't think we've cracked it yet. We're still actively pursuing what are different methods, frameworks that we could use to help us make sure that people are always up to speed. Now, what that means when it comes to these, any vendor relationship is part of the reason to your question of why still stick with you guys is because while it was interesting, the shift from, the perception of this is a role-playing tool to people discovering what else it could do. Again, it's something we're still facing. It's not 100% fixed. And the challenge is the first initial impression during the bootcamp, the onboarding, it is so strong around just the role play that it's very difficult for people to not think of the tool as a role playing tool, but it can actually do quite a bit more. I think one of the most recent features, deep insights to me, was actually a pivoting moment. And again, full candor. Our frontline managers, while they could see scores and how things were doing, and what people were saying or not saying during the calls, it helped, but it didn't add a lot to them. So they were not driving usage for the tool. The moment I showed them, look, for the people that is using the tool, now we can get deep insights across multiple calls. And there's two types of insights, right? There's the quantitative insights and qualitative insights. And I showed them how to use it. Their reaction was like,
you're talking about real client conversations, not role plays.
Yeah. That's the Very good
Mm.
clarifying. This is actual customer calls, right? The moment they saw what this was able to pull from all the calls, and I did a couple of live demos with them, right? It was like,
Yeah.
we can go down to the individual, we can focus at the team level, or let's do across the entire team. And when I did across the entire team, it queried somewhere around 1,400 calls. It was an insane number of calls. Just the way that I positioned it to them, just imagine if you were auditing these calls and you had to listen to
Yeah.
1,400 calls to get insights. How many man hours is that, right? Like, that's an insane amount of human resource they would need to do this.
Yeah.
And we asked it some questions. The moment it came back with the insights, people were like, this is just insane. This is something we've wanted for a really long time. And I know that there are tools out there that
Mm.
somewhat allow you to do this stuff. But the difference, again, is because the way that this is built and the way that we work together for so long, this is grounded in the context of Ergeon, specifically, of our industry and the processes that our team needs to follow. And so the insights that we're getting back from it are immediately applicable. And it transformed the entire relationship with the tool, because now team leads wanted to pull insights and they were facing team members not using it. And so it was like, hey, this is unreliable. Cold start. Why is that you're not using it? Like, I need utilization to be. And now we have teams hitting 100% utilization. 100%. Why? Because if utilization isn't there, the team lead cannot use the insights to coach. And so what has happened now is that they're using the insights to extract what is working, what isn't working, and more importantly, because you can get very, very detailed with these questions, go as far as saying, what was the customer's reaction to this specific phrase that the CS uses, right? Or our sales team member uses. And then it will tell you, right? Like, in this call specifically, team member said this and the customer reacted this way. And then they take all of that information and they use it in their one-on-one coaching. So
It's
that
interesting.
feature transformed things. And to your question, again, going back, why stick with you guys? It is because of things like this. Because while it may not necessarily be perfect, and I don't think any tool will be perfect, we've been working together for so long and we kept on improving that, again, there's this factor of trust, that I trust that by working together, we can overcome some of the challenges and we can keep on delivering value to the team, where it stops being a push. Like, we don't need to mandate usage. People will want to use it. And right now, it's primarily focused at our team leads, but we haven't stopped there. And I know there's more stuff that we've kept on dreaming that I know will completely transform how our sales team members use the tool and how they will get value. The same way the team leads are getting value, in the same way I run even higher level, like cross-region insights to be able to understand consumer behavior. These
I
things,
really love this. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we, again, because we roll out so many things, there's initiatives that we're running. And in the past, understanding efficacy of an initiative required specific metrics, but there's things that are qualitative in nature that the only way to do them is by auditing calls. And now I've been able to do something that in the past we just couldn't. I can understand consumer reaction to specific phrases that the team members are saying. And not only that, because I even, I did the exercise and I, gave it the specific phrases, a combination of different ones. And from there, I actually asked it, can you tell me what are the more common reactions and questions, follow-up questions that the customer has when we say these things? And it called it out. And from there, we created an FAQ, like, to our sales team and to our marketing team. Like, this is what consumers seem to be taking from what we're saying. And this is the first thing that is popping to their head that they're asking us. We should figure out how to communicate that proactively, get ahead of the question. That
You know what's
in the past, impossible.
what's interesting about this? Like, that was the vision when we discussed this internally. We said, look, there are a lot of call recording tools. You got going. Of course, they give you analytics, but it's typically, based on scorecards or specific calls. What if we could actually aggregate all this data and based on conversations, literally AI should go to, let's say, 2,000 calls in span of a week and see if we can find patterns that you can, again, tie these coaching practices or role play sessions to it. And it sounds like it's working. And what I actually learned right now, and we didn't discuss this before in our one-on-one, so it's interesting. The fact that, like, early on, I remember with boot camps, to your point, because they're fresh reps, they want to show, who they are, they want to get into the company. It was an easier almost automated sort of like, although you guys did a fantastic job reinforcing it, but we had
Mhm.
an easier time. Later when we saw like, okay, maybe everybody's like thinking that, hey, we arrived, the usage for roleplay went down.
Yeah.
But with Insight, it seems like we are getting right now this automated support from the frontline managers because they
Mhm.
have a good reason to reinforce usage because they have insights. So
Yep.
it's interesting again to see. I love seeing this like path that sometimes you kind of like you don't navigate those path. Maybe frontline managers don't have a reason as a why they push their team to actually use it. But when they find a reason behind it, the real value is there. They start actually doing that.
I have an
Interesting. Yeah.
anecdotal story of one of
Mm,
our managers. Through the insights, he spotted
yeah.
that a person had specific challenges with some of the pushbacks that we would normally get from
Yeah.
customers. And his thinking was like, let's keep it simple. The instruction was go do some role play in challenge mode.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
challenge mode is where it gets like really difficult. And by the way, challenge mode, it actually made the top closer. It gave him a proper challenge. I listened to it, I was like, this thing's putting up a real fight. And so, the manager said, we'll do some challenge mode role playing for
Yeah.
closing. And that was almost 2 weeks ago. And last week, when we were sort of looking at the numbers,
Yeah.
the performance has already started going up
No.
because of the ongoing, practice in challenge mode.
Look, I love to continue this conversation because you're sharing a lot of great stuff, but we have to wrap it up. And I have some rapid fire questions to ask. So if you're ready for it, short answers, if
I'll
you
try.
don't want to answer, you can skip. Let's go. Complete this sentence. Sales leaders will be more effective if they only.
Earn the trust of their team.
How leading a sales team impacted your personal development?
It's been probably the strongest learning journey because the reality is when you have so many people depending on you every single day,
Yep.
you cannot afford to land in the I don't know what I don't know trap. And so one of the things it has pushed me is not to settle. It's not an option. I need to keep on improving for the sake of my team, the company, and my family, right? The people that depend on me. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's given me strong purpose.
Great answer. My previous guest on the podcast, Chloe Sigmund, she's the head of customer success and support at House. I think you guys should know each other because kind of like in the same
Yep.
space. She asked you a question and she said, "As Jose, if you could go back in time 2 years, what would you do differently?"
I would have done a stronger push on the company to adopt AI because the reality is, while again, compared to most companies, we're many steps ahead. Just a quick side comment: 70% of our code is now AI generated. 80%, and
That's
you
great.
hear some of the big AI first companies making a fuss because they're pushing to get to 50%.
Mhm.
We are already at 70%. So our adoption curve is aggressive, but it started later. And I think when I first started using AI, it was primarily me and just one more person in the company that were like crazy. And we would get together and talk about stuff. And I don't think we did a strong enough push for people to see what it was possible. And so that might have delayed some of the benefits that we're now having. To be fair, like in the past, it would take us months to get a new feature developed internally for our team.
Mhm.
Now it takes us a week. Like we're getting, you can think of it, and as long as an engineer gets what you're looking for, it'll get deployed like
Yeah, for
immediately.
sure.
It has increased our ability to react to, and actually not even react, but be proactive about potential changes. So yeah, that would be my
Makes
change.
sense. Last question. Our next guest is Matthew Loria. He's the VP of Commercial Sales, Sprout Social. What question or questions do you have for him?
With the introduction of AI, everyone is getting better at doing outreach. In B2B, normally most of these instances are cold outreach. So with everyone getting better, how are you staying ahead? How are you really prepping your team to not be taken over by some AI, you know, let's just call it machinery that is able to pump out content, outreach? What is going to make you different?
That's a great question. All right. So that's pretty much it. I enjoyed the conversation, Jose, as always.
Amazing.
Again, I appreciate you joining me. If someone
Thank you
wants to
for
reach
having me.
out to you, can they and how?
Yes. So easily, LinkedIn is probably one of the easiest ways, to be fair. And then for I guess the brave ones, you can try my email, although, gets bombarded quite a bit. It's a simple one, thankfully. So it's jose@ergeon.com.
Amazing.
So plain
All
and
right.
simple.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I guess until next time, bye for now.